Glad to have you join us back on Daybreak on Trust Television, and moving on to our discussion segment. Now, on the segment today, we're exploring a groundbreaking initiative that sets to revolutionize access to education in Nigeria, the Student Loan Scheme. Implemented by the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NELFUND, this scheme aims to provide financial support to indigent students, enabling them to pursue their academic dreams without the burden of tuition fees. Now, with only 2.7 million applicants vying for the loan in the first phase and 1.2 million students already processed for the loan, the interest in this scheme is palpable. But what are the wider implications of this initiative on education in Nigeria? Will it bridge the gap in access to quality education, or will it create new challenges? Joining us today is Mr. Akintunde Sawyerr, Managing Director and Chief Executive of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NELFUND, via Zoom. He will share insights into the scheme's objective, implementation, and potential impact of the education sector. We'll dive into the benefits, challenges, and future prospects of the student loan scheme and explore how it can shape the educational landscape in Nigeria. Mr. Sawyerr, thank you so much for joining us via Zoom from Lagos. Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
All right,
good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so we just go straight to, the topic at hand, which of course is student loan. And we know that it's very, very important in our educational system. Everybody is, should have access to education, and funding should not be a barrier to that dream. So I'll just go straight to find out from you, as the Managing Director and Chief Executive of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NELFUND. Can you, let's look at the policy and the governance surrounding the student loan scheme, and how will you say that the government can ensure the sustainability of the loan scheme in the face of rising unemployment and economic uncertainty?
Okay, so thank you very much. Sort of a few questions in there. The first thing is around the policy. What is the policy? The administration of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who introduced this policy and signed it into law, at least the second version of it, on the 4th of April 2024. The policy is to ensure that no Nigerian student who wants to attain tertiary education in this country, in a publicly owned institution at tertiary level, that's universities, polytechnics, colleges of education owned by either federal government or state government, should be denied that access simply because they don't have the money to pay for the institutional charges. So the policy is to create unfettered access to tertiary education for Nigerian students who are doing their first degrees in any one of those three institutions that I talked about. In terms of the governance around it, because that was your second question. The governance around it is such that we have created a system where it is completely transparent and democratized. So if a student wants to take a loan to attend any one of the institutions that I described, universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, they simply need to certain pieces of information: their JAM registration number, their name, their date of birth, their NIN, i.e. their national identification number, their matriculation number, and of course they must already be enrolled in a school or be admitted into it, without having to meet anybody, without having to know anybody, without having to connect with anybody directly. They can apply for this loan, and it will be considered almost unanimously, if you like, because we don't get to meet the students. On the final question you asked, of the set of three questions you asked around sustainability, built into the law is a provision for the Inland Revenue Service to provide a certain percentage of revenue to the loan scheme. There's also been some other interventions for, us to be able to receive allocations from, in the tax reform bill, certain allocations from the taxes collected, particularly the education tax. But in terms of how we then go on beyond that to make sure that it is sustainable, the law allows the Nigeria Education Loan Fund to raise funds from private sector, from other sources other than government, to take into the scheme so that we can actually begin to fund the education with a hybrid, if you like, of government funds and private sector funding. And then, of course, it is a loan, which means that there's a provision for payback.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sawyerr, for that, enlightening information. So let's look at applicants concerning the student loan. Okay, I think Hawa has a question for you. Please, Hawa, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we know, NELFUND so far has been getting so much interest from a lot of people, from a lot of students, and so far, according to reports, there's been 2.7 million applicants vying for the loan in the first phase, and 1.2 million students already processed for the loan. And as earlier you made note of, it is a loan. So first off, what are the processes in, choosing a viable candidate for this loan, and what are the intricacies when it comes to paying back that loan?
Good morning, Hawa, and thank you for your question.
Yes, good morning.
Hawa, let me just correct some numbers that you just provided, just to make sure that we are absolutely clear and accurate.
All right.
We have had 626,000 registrations, people who have visited our portal and have registered to take the loan. Of that, we've had, as of this morning, the 16th of June 2025, we've had 587,000 people who actually applied for the loan. So the number 2.7 million and the having applied and the 1.2 million being processed is factually incorrect. These are probably numbers that come from the numbers that we believe are eligible. 2.7 million is probably a number that is eligible for the loan. But that's not the number that have applied. So in terms of eligibility, as I said earlier, the applicant needs to be attending a tertiary institution owned by government. In other words, by the federal government of Nigeria or by any of the 36 state governments. The institutions they own, universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, are the eligible institutions or the institutions that eligible students can apply to. The students themselves need to have access the course using JAM. So they must have a JAM registration number and they enter that into our portal. They must have a national identity number because the law only provides this loan for Nigerians. They must have gained admission to an institution, so they will either require an admission number or they will require a matriculation number. Because we also have a provision to pay upkeep directly to the students, so the institutional fees are paid directly to the institution on behalf of the student. The upkeep, the pocket money element of this is paid to directly to the bank account. So they must have an account that is BVN enabled, bank verification number enabled. Now, as long as they fall into these categories, and of course they have to provide us with their name and their date of birth, effectively what we have is a unique set of criteria that allow us to look at the application. Once we've looked at the application, we then make a decision on the eligibility thereafter. So that's essentially the eligibility criteria that is required for people to apply for this loan.
Okay, Mr. Sawyerr, I want us to... Okay.
I believe he answered the first part, but then when it comes to the intricacies of paying back that loan, is there a time frame that's been set up for that student to be able to pay for that loan back?
Thank you, Hawa. I'm sorry I missed out on that. So there is no time frame for payback. Essentially, what the guidelines that we've put out say is that people who have taken this loan are not obliged to start paying this loan back until 2 years post completion of their NYSC. So they graduate, they mobilize for NYSC, they complete their NYSC, and then 2 years after completion of NYSC is when we expect them to start paying back. In other words, there's a 2-year moratorium, if you like, that allows people time to look for work. Now, the intricacies of how this is paid back, it is the employer who is obliged to pay back the Nigeria Education Loan Fund. And I'll be very clear on how that happens. There is a database of all those who have taken this loan. That database is NIN enabled. In other words, the employer, upon receiving the application from the applicant for the job, before they make an offer to that student or to that applicant, sorry, because by now they're an applicant, they're no longer a student. Before they make the offer, they have to go to that website, that portal, to check whether that person has a loan or not. If they have a loan, then the employer is obliged to deduct 10% from the income or from the payment for that student, for that applicant that they're making every month. They make a 10% payment back to the Nigeria Education Loan Fund. Let me be clear, the obligation is on the employer, unless, of course, the applicant is self-employed. If they're not self-employed, the employer is the one with the obligation and the legal requirement or obligation, if you like, to pay back to the fund. If the individual who's in that job loses their job for any reason, the payments stop. If they don't get a job, which is very unlikely within the 2 years, but if in the event that they don't get a job, they don't have to pay back. So your question around, what is the tenor? There is no tenor, because it's 10% of the income they get. There's no other calculation made around it. It's not linked to how much they borrowed. It's linked to their income, and only 10% of their income gets paid back to the NELFUND. If they earn ₦1 million, 100,000 naira gets paid back per month. If they earn 100,000 naira, it's 10,000 naira that gets paid back to the loan fund every month. I hope I answered your question, Howard.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sawyerr, I would love to find out from you concerning the systems that are being used to verify applicants, and also the disbursement of the loans, of course, and even track repayments.
And the what, track repayments?
Yes.
Sorry, I missed the last.
Loans.
I'm sorry?
I would love to find out from you what are the systems in place, making use of technologies to verify applicants, that is, the applicants for the loans, and also how you tend to disburse these loans, and also track repayments as well.
Thank you very much. So these are important questions. The verification question is critical. Now, I mentioned earlier a couple of the requirements that we have for people to be able to apply for this loan. So when they go online and they go to www.nelf.gov.ng, the applicant is faced with a number of questions and a number of requirements for the provision of information, which is info, by their date of birth. The applicant must provide their NIN, their national identity number or identification number. They must provide their JAM registration number. They must provide a matriculation number, which is tied to the institution they're going to or are already in, or an admission number. And at some point thereafter, they must provide us with their bank details and bank verification number. I think you'd agree that no two people in Nigeria have all of this data replicated. The data that we ask for can only belong to one individual. This makes it relatively easy for us to track and verify. So I'll just explain something else to you. The JAM registration number is through an electronic connection to the JAM database. The JAM database gets asked, is this JAM registration number correct? Is it tied to this person? Is it tied to this person with this date of birth? It automatically and gives us a yes or a no. Exactly the same thing happens with the national identification number. The system, as the applicant enters the system and clicks enter, submit, it goes to the National Identity Management Commission, the database, which again confirms whether that NIN is tied to the name, is tied to the date of birth of that individual. If that is confirmed, which is another electronic signal back to our system, then it says that that individual's data correlates with what they've given us. And that confirms that they're now the matriculation number of their identity or the admission number is provided by the institution. We have all of the data loaded in our systems from the different institutions. And again, what it does is an internal check. When the student applicant types in that information, it cross-checks with what is on our database. And once that cross-checks, automatically, in seconds, we get the answer to whether or not the details provided are genuine and accurate. In terms of tracking repayments, as I mentioned earlier, the individuals who are employed and need to pay this loan back, this is automatically done through the checking by the employer that this individual indeed has a loan, and that there is indeed an obligation for the employer to deduct 10% from their wages, from their salaries, if you like, and remit to the Nigeria Education Loan Fund. So far, everything I have described to you is done electronically. There's an electronic footprint, there's electronic verification for all of this, and it has to scale all those hurdles for either the loan to be granted or the repayment even to be accepted. We will not be able to accept repayment on behalf of people who don't exist or who don't have a loan. We will be able to accept payments on behalf of people who have taken the loan and people who exist and are employed. And the obligation, the legal obligation, is on the employer to make sure that we get this information back.
All right. With NELFUND, the big question, it's a huge scheme, pardon me, and it is something that would impact a lot of people. Have there been any challenges that this scheme has faced when it came to implementing it, and how have you tackled that challenge? Especially of recent, we've heard an issue with the ICPC with disbursement and misappropriation, allegations of misappropriation of the funds. So how did you tackle that, and how do you make sure that the money goes to the right people?
So there was and let's go straight to the misappropriation question, because I think it's important that trust is not only established, but is built upon. Look, the ICPC received a number of petitions from students about non-receipt of payments to them. This is a perfectly normal thing for students to do, and it's absolutely right that they should do that. So they have petitioned the enforcement agencies in certain cases to say, we haven't received the benefit of a loan that we signed up for. An investigation or a number of investigations were triggered, and those investigations led the ICPC to come out with a statement saying that there are funds that are missing or possibly missing. The Nigeria Education Loan Fund was implicated in the initial statement. We went straight to the ICPC to say we have a very robust, accountable process for disbursement, and we challenged that position. ICPC was very gracious. They re-examined their statement and came out with another statement within 24 hours saying it was an error. So they had made some sort of error in the statement that was received that generated headlines that funds were missing. They corrected that, and that's been put to bed. But let me be very clear on something. We are managing funds, And wherever funds are being managed, there should always be scrutiny. So the fact that they've come back and said, hey, look, this is fine, we invite them to continue to be part of this process because we want to prevent diversion, not investigate it after it has happened. So that deals with that. You asked also about any challenges that we faced. Of course, this is a huge scheme. It's very ambitious. The president put us under a tremendous amount of pressure to launch a scheme that effectively could affect, I don't know, upwards of 30 million people in the sort of 4 to 5 to 6 years ahead of us. So we have to put something in place that's solid and can effectively deal with that sort of throughput. So we've had to put an IT system in place. The challenges that we've had with that is to ensure that that system is robust and that it works for the purpose that it's there to work for. We need to remember, this is education. Not every student is savvy enough to be able to engage with an online system like that. When ATMs first came into Nigeria, not everybody knew how to use them. So there's the process of education in itself to help people understand how to engage with the system. Also, remember, we're dealing with young people, many of whom are vulnerable. They don't have the right sorts of devices or they don't have internet access. Again, you know, these have been challenging. Those who don't have the right sort of Android devices to be able to access the application process have faced challenges. Those who have the devices but don't have internet connectivity, either because they're in rural areas or because they just don't have, you know, the funds to buy the data, we've had to deal with that. And so we've sent out teams with devices to go and help people in such situations, provide data for people in such situations. It's an ongoing process. We're not fully there yet. And then there's an ongoing activity to try and help people understand how to engage with the portal. We have for those who have problems, they have a button on the site that says contact us, and we interact with them and we try to educate them. We've run a series of technical workshops across a number of states. We've been to virtually every state in Nigeria, not every single one, but virtually every state in Nigeria to deliver the message, the process, the methodology, what needs to happen, what people need to do to be able to apply for these loans. We've gone out there and we've started an education process in itself that has to be continuous. It can't stop. It's an intuitive process. We keep learning, but of course there are challenges. But the happy thing and the good news for us is that in 12 months of operation, a little over 12 months of operation, we've given 587,000 people the opportunity to apply. 626,000 have actually registered, and we've actually given benefit. In other words, we have beneficiaries somewhere in the region of just under 300,000. 298,000 Nigerians have benefited directly for this scheme, to be precise.
Is it something you believe that is very sustainable in the long run and would impact a lot of people as well?
Do I believe it's very sustainable in the long run? Yes. We are putting sustainability is about putting processes that can stand the test of time and can be adapted to move with the times. So I personally believe that it is sustainable. The president has put a lot of political weight behind this. I'll tell you, if you don't have the political weight and the political will, however good a scheme is, it won't work. And the president has personally intervened on a number of occasions to say this scheme must work, it must be funded, it must be adequately resourced. And so that in itself speaks to the opportunity for sustainability. The other thing I should tell you is that Nigerians are yearning for education. Everybody recognizes in Nigeria that the way to get up the ladder in this country is to get a good or a better education. The administration of President Bola Tinubu recognizes that for Nigeria to be globally competitive, our people must be educated. That's what we're driving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sawyerr. So let's look at the future perspective of the student loan. Yeah, really, what potential impact do you see the student loan scheme having on Nigerians' human capital development and also the economic growth as well?
So, yeah, thank you. I think, it's very clear when you look at countries across the world, the South Koreas, the United States, the Chinas of this world, the Canadas of this world, the Finlands, the Switzerlands, the UKs, the competitive advantage that they have had is in the fact that their people have been educated to the highest possible level. If you have a nation that doesn't have educated people, you become effectively the manual labor or the manual laborers for the rest of the world. Low wages, hard work, physical work. I think what we recognize is that, or what the administration of President Tinubu recognizes is that, this is not a sustainable situation for a country that's in the top 10 most populous countries in the world and growing. We're rising up the ladder. So to this end, we're also going to be introducing a vocational skills training program to ensure academic and who to do vocational work, which is what a developing country like Nigeria needs, are adequately educated through the provision of access to learning via the NELFUND. So it's clear that, education is the topmost thing every nation needs to do if they want to get up the ladder. The second thing they need to do is get education. And the third thing that every nation must do as well is get education. With those three things, I think we're on the right track, and, even jobs will be created, commerce will grow, the economy will grow, but education is the starting point, not sharing of the national wealth.
All right. An important question is are there any plans of expanding, the scheme to other areas such as vocational training and, postgraduate studies as well?
Yes, sorry, I was just saying that we have a mandate to expand the scheme into vocational training. So I think what you will notice is that we, like many other arms of government, the president has made a point of ensuring that the vocational training opportunities spread across a number of agencies and a number of ministries. For example, the Ministry of Education under Dr. Maruf Tunji Alausa has just launched an excellent scheme, a TVET scheme, which is hugely popular. Lots of people are signing up for it. We have a scheme of our own, which we will launch very shortly, that will seek, as I said, to expand education beyond academic education. The trades, the carpenters, the joiners, the furniture makers, the technicians who repair cars, repair airplanes, people, welders, all of the sort of trades that make the infrastructure of any nation continue to be properly maintained and to stand up to the vagaries of deterioration and damage. We need these people, and we need to train people and take them up to a standard that will enable them to be able to work, on some of the most interesting infrastructure development that's already coming. As we can see, the administration is doing a lot of investing hugely in infrastructure. But even in our infrastructure at home, electricians, plumbers, tilers, all of these, bricklayers, all are trades that are needed to keep those who are living in cities and in rural areas, in adequate, living conditions. And we need to deliver dignity to those who are doing these types of work. It's not work to be looked down upon. In the most developed countries in the world, the intellectuals and the academics work alongside, and in many cases have earning equivalents to those who are doing the vocational and skills trade. So, there are plans to expand. Just the other part of your question about, are there plans to push this into, not for now. We have enough people who are going through the secondary education system in this country and are stopping there. It's not acceptable. We have enough people who are going in for their first degrees or equivalent in tertiary institutions who are dropping out, sometimes at the last hurdle, because they've run out of money. So we are going to focus our resources on those people, making sure that they don't drop out, and making sure that those who are really good and have the desire to go beyond secondary education have the opportunity. Our obligation is to those people first. They have less opportunity than those who've already got their first degree and want to go and do a postgraduate. We'll get to them over time.
Okay, Mr. Sawyerr, is this scheme fair enough to include people with disabilities? Because, I mean, they are also part of the society, and they also have, you know, the right to, you know, have access to these loans as well.
So, yeah, that's a very fair question. And, you know, nobody chooses to be disabled. My Zoom just went off. Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Please
sorry.
go ahead.
Nobody chooses to be disabled. Nobody chooses to be disabled. Nobody chooses to be a person with a disability. And people with disabilities, interestingly enough, are also as clever as people who are able-bodied. They're as desirous of a good life. And so our system is non-discriminatory. People with disabilities can apply for these loans and get these loans. However, I will say some fees have a higher cost base. It is more difficult for them to get to school from a physical perspective. You can imagine people who have visual impairment or hearing impairment always need additional support. People necessarily need wheelchairs. You know, the truth about it is that, you know, the people with disabilities always have a more difficult time. Thing that we can to ensure that we capture those who, you know, may be disadvantaged in one way or the other and bring them firmly into the fold. It's part of what we're working on. It's part of what we're looking into to see what are the categories, what are the challenges, what are the difficulties. We've started so we have a good sense of it. But yes, absolutely, people with disabilities definitely need to be part of this scheme. Some of the smartest people on this planet have disabilities. We need to.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sawyerr. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you for shedding more light on what NELFUND is all about and how people can go about, you know, being involved in this scheme. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. Thank you both. And I'll be happy to come back when you have more questions for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.